Hello, and welcome back to Music Industry 360 Podcast, brought to you by Symphonic Distribution. I'm your host, Randall Foster. I am Chief Creative Officer at Symphonic, and with me today is Tom DeGeorge. Tom is the owner of Crowbar, which is a fantastic independent venue in Tampa. He was also one of the leaders of our Save Our Stages movement in cooperation with NIVA, where he currently serves as Southeastern Regional President. And last but certainly not least, Tom is one of the co-founders of Dtour, which is a touring consortium of independent venues. Tom, thank you so much for being here with us today.
Randall, thank you so much for having me.
So let's start at the beginning. Tell us a little bit about yourself. How did you get into this venue ownership, independent music champion position you're in today?
Well, as far as the venues go, what happened was I was going to Penn State University. I was a major in criminal justice, and I was minoring in sociology. And like most college kids, while I was in school, I was working my way through school, bouncing in different bars and venues, and did live music for a few years, graduated from college, and thought, you know what? I really dig this. I had done an internship in Atlanta in '96 at the Olympics, and had been at the Masquerade over there in Atlanta when it was at the old wood chip mill. And I thought, that place is so cool. I'm going to put out some resumes in Atlanta. And I put out like 30 resumes in Atlanta, and the only place that responded to me was the Masquerade in Atlanta. And I was a 23-year-old kid with no general manager experience at that point, and they brought me in for 2 days worth of interviews and hired me. I always tell people it was the best paid internship I've ever had. I'm forever thankful to those guys. And after a couple of years in Atlanta, they asked me to come down here to Tampa. I managed the Masquerade here in Tampa from 2001 to 2006, which is where the historic Ritz Theater is. And that closed in February 2006. And at that point, I was like, I think I want to open up my own place. So I opened up Crowbar in October 2006, and 17 years later, and in one pandemic, here we are, and so I got lucky. My number got called during the pandemic as somebody who the National Independent Venue Association thought could help save our stages, and I'm incredibly grateful for that opportunity that they gave me as well.
Well, your advocacy there certainly was incredible and impressive. Tell us a little bit more about Crowbar at large. Is as a venue, do you all focus on a specific genre of music? Is it known as a rock room, or are you across the board, genre-wise, band-wise, et cetera?
No, I think, when we first opened, I came out, in interviews and articles, and told people from the beginning, I said, I want to work with as many promoters as possible. I want to cover as many different genres as possible. I don't want to be pigeonholed into one type of music, and I want to be a live music and special events venue that we could basically do anything and people wouldn't be surprised that it was at Crowbar. And I did do that. I work with, over the years, I've probably worked with 20 to 30 different independent promoters. Currently, I probably work with about a little bit over a half dozen. And I think if you ask people that, we've been able to do that. It's not abnormal here. And my calendar would show it, to have a metal show one night, a hardcore show the night after that, a bedroom pop show the night after that, a comedy show the night after that, hot dog eating competition the night after that, and, an art show the night after that. It's, I consider Crowbar a tastemaker venue, that is always pushing the envelope. 17 years and I'm still trying to recreate this place every chance I get, because I think if you can continue to do new things and cutting edge things and reinvent yourself and stay relevant and make a major announcement every few weeks, I think that's how you stay in this game,
Absolutely. Well, and I've had the pleasure of attending events there, and I do think it's a fantastic space. You mentioned the sheer number of promoters you've worked with throughout the years. Do you find that number is shrinking or growing at this point?
I think it's shrinking a little bit. I think that, it's been pretty vocal about this. We were able to extend our lease to 2026. My lease was supposed to end in 2022. And I renegotiated it with my landlord during the pandemic. Not to flip back and forth, but when the Save Our Stages was happening and I was trying to raise that money and be a part of that team, once we were getting the funding, what I was finding was operators that were waiting to get their funding because they had fallen behind on their rent. Their venues were getting sold out from under them. Some landlords that were desperate for money were selling to other people that I saw that were moving from up north down south, because up north they couldn't be open at all. So people were coming down south and taking people's buildings. Developers also zeroed in on things because it was an easy time. Like a hawk going for its prey. Developers, it was easy for them to come in. So I had talked to my landlord and said, listen, I know Ebor's changing. I won't fall behind on my rent. We're going to get this federal funding. But once I get it, I need time to be able to recoup and spend it, pay off any loans I took out. So I was able to extend that lease to 2026. But then knowing too that would be some finality there. And so it's been important to me, knowing that we've got about roughly 3.5 years left to take things to a real level of professionalism and try to knock every single show we do straight out of the park. I've been telling people I'm trying to pitch fastballs and no hitters. I want every show to be memorable. It's hard to find that many people to work with that want to bring that level of intensity. When you're looking at each show now that's on the calendar, and you know that you only have a certain amount of days, you want to make every show count, every show memorable. And I just, so I've minimized the promoters I'm working with because the calendar is becoming so full. I also, through the Save Our Stages, that put a national spotlight on our venue. I had done, for the advocacy, I'd been on CNN, I had done Fox Business News, I had been the Washington Post, the New York Times, the Rolling Stone magazine. So it really put a spotlight on the venue. So I'm also getting a lot of opportunities where bands are reaching out to me personally, and they want to play the room. So it's just hard to include, we have dates on the calendar right now that have 14 holds on them. So it's just hard to work with, that many, even working with half a dozen promoters is a lot.
So that's fantastic that you've tightened the reins and that you're working with fewer, better promoters. I'm sure that you're sharing promoter information with your other colleagues across the United States. Was that kind of how Dtour got its origins, was just a sharing of resources and information? Do you want to tell us about Dtour and where it started, the foundation there?
Well, I think the foundation for Dtour, when we were doing the NIVA work, outside of those NIVA calls, there was discussion between a small group of us, like, what if once we get this done, we continue to collaborate with each other? I think, prior to Save Our Stages, I don't think, as an independent venue owner, that word independence really important, and so I think that originally the thought of collaboration didn't exist until we all were forced to meet each other. So once that happened and we had the relationship outside of the NIVA meetings, some of us discussed, like, well, what if we formed a separate entity that we could do this type of work together, where we could leverage our relationships in order to provide additional opportunities to independent venue owners and promoters around the country. And it was the dream, we worked on, after going through such an incredible high of the Save Our Stages and getting that largest arts bill in history passed. It was $17 billion. And we got $900 million here for the state of Florida with that incredible team of people. The thought was, what can we, outside of NIVA and Save Our Stages, do next? So being the first ever company to bring independent venues together and promoters together all around the country and be able to route national tours while keeping all those offers in those venues, in those promoters, in those individual communities, and lifting up small businesses all over the country. That was the dream, and we're doing it. It's becoming a reality, and it's very rewarding. The work I've done from the pandemic and then on has been some of the most rewarding work I've ever done in my career. It's truly been a blessing.
Well, I love that streak of independence there. And as you know, Symphonic we really pride ourselves on being independent and serving the independent community. And, it feels to me like, as I've watched the industry over the last several years, we're having more and more conglomerates just gobble everything up, whether it be on the publishing label side of things or, in so many cases, the venue side of things. These rooms that we used to consider to be great independent rooms are no longer independent, and now you've got to be a part of this company or that company's routing. So I think, would you say Dtour is a direct knee-jerk reaction to try to codify these independent venues against that sort of invasiveness?
Well, what I would say is, now that we have a bird's eye view of the country and we can see that what's happening here in Tampa, what's happening to the way venues have had to move out of Ybor City, or close completely because they can't find a room or can't afford the market because things are gentrifying. When I have a bird's eye view of the whole country and I can see that that's not a situation that's just happening here in Tampa, Florida, that it's happening all over the country. It's happening, I know you know this, in Nashville, to people like the Exit Inn that's no longer owned by Chris Scott. It's happening in Cleveland. It's happening in Pittsburgh. It's happening all over the country. So once you see that and you realize it, for me at least, and I know the wish would be, maybe if Crowbar could stay around longer. To me, it's more like, just like how when the pandemic happened, and I told people Crowbar will be okay no matter what. But if venues around the country close, Crowbar will close eventually by default because bands won't be able to get to Crowbar, or other corporations will be monopolizing the industry and will just be at a loss. So to me, I look at it and I'm like, I've been in brick and mortar, 17 years here at Crowbar and another 8 years for the Masquerade. I've lived my dream, for 25 years. I want to make sure that the next 25-year-old kid that wants to get into this industry, if they want to open up their own room, then it's a real possibility. So that's where, for me at least, where Dtour comes from. It comes from protecting our ecosystem and also keeping those independents around, because independent venues are the true supporters of young local independent artists that eventually become the artists of the future that play Amalie Arena and Raymond James Stadium and the Amway Center. People over the weekend, everybody was talking about Taylor Swift, which is phenomenal, and Shine Down in 3 Days Grace over at Amway. All those artists start in places like Crowbar. If in a perfect world, that's where they would start. Even the artists that break on TikTok now, if they don't have the ability to get better in a live room setting, their live performance isn't going to reach the levels it needs to. So it's vitally important that we protect these rooms and protect the independent ecosystem. And that's what Dtour is all about. It's not about being against anybody. It's just about being for the little guy and independent rooms and promoters all around the country, because they're relevant and they're essential. They are truly essential to the ecosystem that we know and love so much. You can't and shouldn't try to control live music and live performance. It has to be free.
No, you're fantastically stated. I actually, in my prep for today's call, I found an essay you had written that was shared right around the Save Our Stages movement, and you said as much in that essay. But to our listeners, I would encourage you to Google Tom DeGeorge and check out the essay that he wrote, because it really, the spirit of independent music and the trickle-down effect of the economy with regards to, you got to start on a small stage before you can get on a medium stage, before you get on a big stage, it hits so far home for me, because as you said, we are running out of stages to play on. Is it worth talking on the Dtour side of things? You had made a comment to me about tour routing and about how you all had built the capabilities of tour routing basically coast to coast, all in independent rooms. Do you want to talk to that a little bit?
Yeah, I mean, that's the whole point. The way I look at it, Dtour, all we do is we work as a middleman or a conduit to the agent, the manager, or the band themselves. And we don't need the whole tour either. We can say, listen, if there's certain cities that you want to go into, that's great. But we have people in every market, so let us deepen your tour. And then, unlike the larger corporations that throw money at the artist and then buy the entire tour, all we do is we reach out into those markets and we find the most suitable room for that artist where they're going to have the best experience. And we tell that person that they have 24 to 48 hours to put in their offer. And then we go collect those offers, bundle them together, and top sheet them for the agent, manager, or band, and say, these are the dates we got for you. This is how much it's worth. So in essence, all that money still stays in that individual community, so the venue, the money's staying with the venue. The money's going direct to the artist. That independent venue, because we know independent venues support local, so that independent venue is going to hire the local person to do the gig poster. They're going to send the band to the local restaurant down the street to eat. They're going to advertise in the local publications like Creative Loafing. And all that money is going to stay in those communities. When we were doing the Save Our Stages, we would tell people that for every dollar that was spent on the show, like $15 was spent in the community. When it's an independently booked show, that's totally true, because the people that come to the concerts spend all that money around their neighborhood, and then they also, go to the restaurants, go to the hotels, shop a little retail, so all the money stays there. So Dtour is just trying to keep that happening as much as possible, and make sure that these local economies are lifted up, and also the venue owners and the artists are having the best relationship possible. So the artists can grow and the venues can stick around.
That's awesome. And I assume that the ticketing is all venue based, right? So you're not centralizing the ticketing like some of the large conglomerates.
No, it's all, like I said, we just top sheet the offers. The venues still do everything they would normally do. So that's the other thing. With our network, we tell the venues and promoters that are in our network, like, listen, we're not trying to replace any booking strategy we do. We're just like Santa Claus. We're hoping to bring you 5 more shows a year that you wouldn't be able to get on your own, because we're facilitating this process for somebody that wouldn't have been able to go as deep as we possibly can, And so we're really just gift wrapping shows for people, and then they just put in the offers. They use their own ticketing platforms. The only thing that we ask a promoter or a venue that we bring an event too is that they add $1 surcharge on a ticket. And that's really right now the only income that Dtour brings in. And that's simply just so we can eventually hire staff, because right now, those of us that founded it are continuing to do all the work on our own.
Wow. So you're running this entire organization with a $1 surcharge, and that's it.
Well, the Dtour itself, once again, the money's put our money where our mouth is. Like the whole point of Dtour was not for Dtour to make money. It was to lift up indies around the country. We have, the company itself, we have no desire to make money. We just need to be able to have functionality. It's really about keeping indies alive. It's where my full focus is. And that's why, having our founder group and our affiliate network, everybody involved feels that way, and it's really special.
That's very cool. I've pulled up your website here, and I assume that if an artist or a manager wanted to look at utilizing Dtour to help fill out a tour across the United States, they need only go to the website?
Yeah, they go to the website. There's an email on there that people can email and go from there.
Awesome. And that's d/tour.live for our listeners. And there's a brilliant map here for our listeners that when you go to the website, you can really envision routing all the way across the United States in a very, very plain and simple way. And I'm really impressed. I knew a handful of the venues that were affiliated, but there's a lot more black dots on this map than I thought there were going to be, Tom.
Yeah. And it's constantly, we're constantly growing and evolving. When we first started, you could see if you look at our founder network, the different areas we're in. Of course, I'm here in a tertiary market in Florida, and then we have founders in, Wichita, Kansas, Louisville, Kentucky, Nashville, Cleveland, Ohio, Iowa, and our focus originally was secondary and tertiary markets, because those were the ones that we felt, don't get noticed, need the most help. And so even just based off of our founding network, we went into those areas that are less known first, because those are the ones we figured, probably get left out a little bit. And then we've just continued to grow from there into more major markets.
Yeah, and I'm actually very impressed with your artist list here as well. There's some bands and folks in there I know and recognize well. Well, bravo, hat tip to you all for what you're doing there. I grew up in independent venues and taking it fully for granted when I look back upon it. And I can't imagine that I would be doing what I do today if it weren't for those venues and those opportunities that they brought me. And so thank you to you and the Heart Keys and everyone else for their time put in on that front. Before we
talk about the Heart Keys though, well, the Heart Keys, I said the Heart Keys too. Those people, they're doing Midtopia out there in Wichita, which is basically an organization of artist development for all their artists out there. I know we don't have time to get into that, but man, what they're doing with Midtopia out there is truly incredible, and once again, that's, they're founders and much of their time is spent on lifting up young artists to try to get them to the next level, and it's just great work they're doing out there.
Yep. Very familiar with it. I've got an artist that's part of that right now. So
that's incredible.
It's been fun to watch from the ground up for sure. So like we do in so many of these interviews, we don't sign off without me putting you a little bit on the spot. And so I have to ask you, and this is, all meant tongue in cheek, but currently, what is your favorite band that you're listening to? It's got to be a current band though. Nothing throwback. Somebody new, somebody fun that is on repeat right now in your Spotify account?
Well, I say this a lot, so it's probably not going to be a big surprise. One of my favorite bands is Half Dead Will Travel. Every time I go on a road trip, I listen to them. Those guys have been my friends for a really long time. And I'm a huge fan of theirs, personally and professionally. And just love their music. I really like, Americana. It's good stuff. And it's hard to pick one, but just because of my relationship with them, I listen to them a lot. And then, I can listen to hip hop all day long too, but if I had to say one band, I'd say Half Dead Will Travel.
Awesome. Well, half the reason I asked that question is because I learn of new bands I didn't already know about half the time when I ask that question.
Right on.
That's one that I'm not familiar with. So now I've got something to listen to this afternoon. Tom, thank you so much for joining us today. We've covered an awful lot of ground. Everyone, Tom DeGeorge, owner and proprietor of Crowbar, Tampa, and co-founder of Dtour, which I think is just such an incredible, benevolent act that you are all doing on behalf of independent venues and independent music. I am Randall Foster, and this is Music Industry 360, and you've been listening to Tom DeGeorge. Thank you so much for being here, and please come back regularly for upcoming episodes. We are available everywhere you go to find your podcasts. Thank you. Goodbye.